Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us on today's webinar titled People Powered ERP, presented by Jasmine O'Reilly. For those of us meeting for the first time, I'm the founder of Maintain Technology, and I'm really excited to see what Jasmine is presenting today. There's some rich pieces of information in there that I'm sure you'll all have some key takeaways to take. I've spent the last 20 years across the ERP industry supporting government, private organizations through some of the most critical ERP transformations. In each of those items, in each of those deliveries, we've always had a very strong practical focus on people first delivery, and you'll see some of those themes come out in today's webinar. We'll move through a couple of slides. There we go. On to the next one. The Humans of ERP is a series that we run. This is a part of our series. We spotlight real people behind transformation, behind ERP implementations. We run stories, we run webinars, mentorships to help build capability across the ecosystem, the ERP ecosystem. My story, I believe, is coming out this week, if not very early next week, so stay tuned for that. If you're new here, welcome. We'd love for you to get involved, either as a speaker, a mentor, or also by sharing your story across Humans of ERP. Today, we are hosted by Maintain Technology. We're a senior strike force team specializing in high-stakes ERP delivery, ERP programs. We specialize in SAP, a lot of the world of the public cloud now, but that doesn't limit us from delivering other critical, mission-critical enterprise applications. With that, I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Jasmine. You'll see Jasmine on camera. Jasmine is the founder of the Outlier Group and a very experienced change leader who believes that change shouldn't be managed, it should be experienced. I think you're going to see some of the themes rich today. With over 15 years working experience across major Australian organisations, her organisation and her teams help design transformation that people can feel, believe, and live. You'll feel a lot of that emotion, I'm sure, as Jasmine presents her webinar today. The approach that Jasmine applies blends strategy, insight, and creativity. So this often turns the traditional change models upside down, with a big, strong focus on memorable experiences. So without further ado, I will hand over to Jasmine, and Jasmine will showcase her webinar for today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John. And while I get the share sorted, hopefully that's coming through loud and clear now. Beautiful. Me and technology. It's the great irony. Thank you so much for having me. And this is actually my second time working with Humans of ERP. I didn't know you hadn't been featured yet, so I think I beat you to that. So thank you very much for having me. It's very humbling. And I guess before we launch into this topic, I'm very keen to share just a little glimpse of my story and where I come from. And as you mentioned, John, I have been working in and around projects for we say over 15 years when it's getting close to 20. I can't believe I'm that old. But for a very, very long time in a really interesting array of industries. So I've worked a lot in banking and finance, stockbroking as part of that, long time in telecommunications, agriculture, higher education. And it's only in the last 5 years I've had my own project and change management consultancy, which again opens up your eyes to all sorts of other industries as well. And I mention that because it's through the collection of working with so many companies and so many different types of projects, from ERPs to non-IT implementations, that you realize that whilst they are all different in terms of their technical requirements, there is something that defines them as the same. And when we look at what makes a project a successful project, I've got enough visibility over all those years to know that the make or break for a lot of projects is people. And I'm going to talk today about a little bit about how, if you are doing an ERP implementation, how you can activate people in the right way, and to hopefully encourage people who are watching this webinar today to think beyond the people who are in the project team or those, that stakeholder group that you're working with on a project. There's so many people that you can engage to make an ERP implementation a success. So that's me. I'm really passionate about change. I'm really passionate about people. And hopefully there's at least one or two key takeaways from today. So I might jump straight into it then. Okay, so maybe to kick us off, I'm going to start by saying, if I said, could you please describe an ERP implementation in one word? And I know maybe I'll pause and let you think of that one word. I doubt many people are going joy, excitement, empowerment, even though they should, John. We know ERPs are very, very cool when implemented properly. But what people usually say when they're thinking of ERPs is that it's expensive or it's exhausting, it's complex. They might even be saying it's a necessary evil. And today, I'm going to hopefully give you some tips and tricks of how you can flip the narrative on that, because an ERP, like any technical or non-technical project, can actually be really fun. It can be a hero project. And I'm going to show you our P4E framework that we use at Outlier Group. So moving on to the next slide. It's testing me with the tech. Okay, perfect. All right. So when an organization does kick off an ERP transformation, and this could be when it's just a kernel of an idea, it hasn't even made it to the business case yet. I've been in enough of those rooms, and I'm sure you have as well, John, to know that the conversation almost always starts in the exact same place. The questions are, which system are we going to choose? How are we going to integrate into it? How much is it going to cost? Which sort of technical teams do we need? When are we going to go live with this thing? And that sort of forms the business case. That's what goes to the board. That's what informs the budget. And we become a little bit obsessive over those more technical requirements, and we obsess over the budget. But as I said, it's rarely the technology that's the success or failure of an ERP implementation. We know, ERPs have been going in for a very long time. There are some really best-in-class solutions out there. But if you don't already know this stat, over 70% of projects universally fail, and that includes ERPs. And so the problem is, if it's not the tech, if it's not the code, if it's not the solution, what is the problem? And the problem is really on that people side of change. And in my experience, it really comes down to how well do people adopt and embrace that new piece of technology that you're putting into their organization. So this is where we talk about the real transformation. So I encourage anybody who's dialing in right now, or who is watching this back, that we absolutely need to shake off that terminology or that sentiment that an ERP is just a system replacement. It absolutely isn't. It is actually a complete rewiring of how people work, how they communicate with one another, and how decisions are made. And it's an improvement initiative. It's a productivity improvement. It's efficiency. It is very, very exciting if done right. And as I've kind of mentioned a couple of times, if we treat an ERP implementation purely as an IT project, then we will fail. Maybe the project will go in, maybe we'll hit our budget and our timeline and our schedule, but are we going to realize the benefits that we set out when we were first doing that business case? And it's really easy to counteract that, and that is, you can guess, by engaging with people early, because when they feel part of the change, when they co-design the change, that's when you actually get legitimate transformation. So hopefully this is inspiring you to maybe look at ERP in a brand new way. Before I introduce the model that we use at Outlier, I want to face into a common misconception that we see in project land, and that is that people don't like change. I'm just going to let you sit with that for a minute. Have you heard this? Have you heard the words resistance or change fatigue? And I'm not dismissing those things, but the the perception that people don't like change is not necessarily true. We are actually biologically and evolutionary hardwired to deal with change. If you have, a saber-toothed tiger running at you, you need to figure out what you're doing next. We are not rigid in how we function. So humans are okay with change. What we aren't so okay with is when it's pushed on us, when we don't understand why the change is happening, and when our point of view hasn't been considered. So change is a good thing, but if we absolutely need to include people in that process. So this is why we're really at Outlier. We have developed a model which is based on a lot of change management methodologies and models that are out there, and we've kind of made our own little hybrid, and we call it the P4E model. Very original. We need another acronym in the project world, but here's one for you. And so you can see it does stand for those words that you can see on the screen, and I'm about to deep dive into each of them. So that stands for position, engage, evolve, embed, and enable. And as I mentioned, we do call this our integrated change management model because we think that change should be hand in glove, working with project delivery and technical delivery from day one, and in fact, pre-initiation of a project. Today, I see all too often that change is kind of this added on module, mostly at the end of a project, including ERP implementations. And so it falls short. People are informed too late, they're engaged too late. And, then we're surprised when people aren't adopting our new technology. So absolutely integrating it. We see this as something that doesn't have to be the role of a change manager. It could be the project manager, it could be the project team. The other thing that you'll notice with P4E are the arrows. So they do go around and they do go in both directions, and that is by design because a lot of change management methodologies, and the most common one that we use is the ADKAR model. They are sequential in nature. So they assume that the individual goes through each phase of the change process one by one in a very structured and rigid way. And just like I said, humans are hardwired to deal with change. We can also know, humans are actually not rigid. We're very flexible. So there's some limitations with those traditional models. And so we like P4E because you can flip between these things throughout the whole process of a project. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And it's evolving, it's evergreen, it's dynamic. So it's not linear, it's not a checklist, it's actually a cycle. And that's how we do achieve sustainable change. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we are intentional about moving people from being confused or being, having an unknown to having clarity and capability. So that's what P4E is all about. But as promised, I'm going to share a little bit more on what each of those things mean and provide you with some examples of how we've used them in projects at Outlier. So starting with position, and we've got a little bit of a graphic here, and you'll see the word at the top, the tagline there is that we view position as both a noun and a verb. So as a noun, it's really taking that time to understand where are we today, and that's shown in that little circle that says current position, and then what is our goal or our North Star, depicted as a star in this graphic here, and then what's our reality of where we are today and where we need to go. Do we know the gap that we're working towards? As a verb, where do we place ourselves so that we can be successful? How are we going to actually position ourselves to achieve that North Star? And as I mentioned, we really, really need to understand that gap. And that gap informs us, what are our business requirements? What is our technical requirements? What's our change plan? What's our change activity? We need to understand position. And really interestingly, position is not something you do once. You check in multiple times throughout the project. And so this is probably a good time for me to change screens and show you a little bit about position. So what does considering position look like when you are doing an ERP or actually any type of project? And you'll see there that we've listed some position activities. And if you've been in project world for a little while, or even as a practice change manager, you will see no surprises here, which hopefully is really, really good news for you. Because as I mentioned, it's integrated with project delivery. And we're just, I guess, putting a different lens on how we might do some of these activities. Where we see great opportunity to do position really well is at the start of the project, and the classics that jump out during the scoping, the project scope and objectives exercise that you're doing, and that sometimes happens either pre or post business case. And then the other one, the classic for changes out there, is the change readiness assessment, and that really does let us know where are we versus where we want to be, and what is that gap? Can the business handle this change? The other one that we do, which is really helpful for position, is our current state and future state process mapping. And as with these and some of the others that we'll go with, you'll go, Jasmine, we already do all of these things. Yes, absolutely, we do sometimes if we're doing these in a project. But I really encourage you to come to these deliverables and to these governance items with a very strong people lens. We often do these with purely technical lens. So if you are considering people, if you are doing discovery, you're going to bring their point of view into these items as well, which does take me to an example. So we did have a project a couple of years ago where we were doing a modern workplace project with a client, and we were working with an executive that had what I would say is a predefined solution for a role-based hardware rollout to 3,000 staff. And our team were engaged to, I guess, pick up that scope and roll it out from go to woe. And before we did that, we very politely said, no, we have to do one step before that. And we insisted on doing in-person and virtual discovery at all 70 of this particular client's sites. It sounds like that was a lot of work, but it actually wasn't. We were able to do that quite quickly. And what we came out with was, first and foremost, a really rich understanding of what actually makes the business and those specific roles tick. And we were able to write solution for those roles. And we actually ended up saving the client over 50% of their budget because we were able to do right fit hardware matching for their team. So that small step at the start to understand position and what the gap was actually saved them a lot of money and a lot of time with that project. So it was a really worthwhile exercise to engage with the business and hear from them rather than make a decision from a head office. So my key takeaway for you when it comes to position is be very, very clear and take the time to understand two really big things. One, where exactly are you today? Not a hypothesis. Really take the time to understand with fact where you are, and know exactly with clarity what your North Star is, and make sure that is really accurately recorded. When you know those two things, then you know your guardrails that you're working towards, you know your gap, and I guarantee you it would be much harder for your project to drift off course if you know those two pieces of information with high accuracy. So that is position. Hopefully a couple of little thought starters there for you. Let's jump into our next item in the P4E model, and this is our first E of the acronym, and this is engage. So the very first thing I want you to do is have a look at these concentric circles. And in the very middle, we have the project team, and beyond that, we have our stakeholders that are around our project team. And often a little bit of a shortfall when it comes to ERP implementations and all sorts of projects is that we think engagement stops at those two inner circles. But you will notice that this diagram is written in a way that it actually looks like, ripples in water. There are lots of people who are impacted by the ERP or the technical project that you are implementing, and we don't often consider them. yes, we might do a stakeholder analysis, but are we making assumptions? Are we guessing we know what those other stakeholders mean? And I think that's probably where the more deeper and richer insights lie are in those outer rings of this model. So those outer rings, we've obviously got the wider organization and our change leaders and our influencers in the wider organization. And then potentially most importantly are our end users, and sometimes they are frontline staff. And, you know, sometimes that's also our customers. Do we actually ask them or survey them or look at some of the data they've provided us of what do they want and how, you know, does our project meet their needs? 9 times out of 10, we don't often do this. So this particular phase of P4E, we like to describe as being about collaboration. So collaborating with all these groups, being really curious to having the design or our thinking be shifted a little bit. And it really is based on that philosophy that we are building something together. So going down now into how do you bring engage activities to life? And just like I said earlier, some of these are classic project deliverables that you would have seen before. But I think what's really, really important to mention is that some of the best engagement actually happens beyond the project team. So it is those incidental water cooler encounters, as we call them, or it is our change champions, or it is you know, the business talking to other people in the business that actually has the biggest engagement effect with a project. So your best marketing is done kind of outside of your team, so to speak. And we often forget that. We do sometimes have change champions, but, you know, have we really considered, have we got the right ones? An example of this that we've done at Outlier is that we were working with a very large company in the fitness industry, and we were putting in a brand new human capital management system for them. So it was a very large change, a very big change, and lots of sites across multiple countries were in scope for this. And we developed a campaign that informed people really early on what we were doing, and we invited them to actually show their commitment to this project for it to be successful at go live. And this was 2 months in advance of this project even actually being rolled out to the wider business. And we did something really simple, really cheap. In fact, it was pretty much free, where we just sent people a template, a blank sheet of paper that says, what is your commitment to making this project a success? And then of how many sites? We have 300 plus sites. We received over 150 photos back from people from all of these sites all across Australia, New Zealand, and over into Asia, with their commitment of what they were going to do. And then we put those photos straight onto a public place so that the rest of the organization could see. And that had an incredible network effect, because instead of head office or the project team telling people about the change, it was the wider business, their peers, people that look and feel just like them, saying, we're standing by this, this is really exciting. And so that was a very successful go live, because it was really led at a grassroots level. And that's easy and cheap, and you can do that too, even with a project like an ERP. So my key takeaway when it comes to Engage is that when we are rolling out technical change or any sort of business-led initiative, our job is to, you know, light that match, get that spark going, to create the fuel that gets that collective desire going. And it shouldn't be something that's done at the end. It should absolutely be done right at the start, make people feel like they absolutely have a voice, they have an opinion, and you're bringing them on the journey. And that's not necessarily tricky to do. All right, moving on, let's go to our next item on the P4E model, and that is enable. So we often fall into the trap of thinking, build it and they will come. They won't if you don't bring them on the journey. And even if people do, you know, start using your new technology, and maybe that's by force because they have no other choice, because you may have already decommissioned the old tool. they might not necessarily know what to do when they get there. And when people don't know what to do, they make up their own solutions, or they use, an offline version. How many times have you seen people with their own local Excel spreadsheet, which we don't want? And so this is why enablement is really, really key. And it's about building the capability to match the technology. So at Outlier, we like to call this the practical build phase. And there are two really quick wins that you can do here to bring this to life for your project, particularly in ERP implementation. The first one that I like to talk about is having some sort of advisory committee from your end users, from array, right across the organization, if it is impacting the whole enterprise, who help inform the technical design. They might not necessarily have the nous to be able to actually do any sort of technical design, but, ask them the questions of that practical application for that module, for that tool, for that workflow, to really sense check whether you're actually building the right thing that's going to be used. The other really quick win is in the testing space, and specifically in user acceptance testing. I've worked in lots and lots of IT projects, and there's always UAT in there, but it's not always a genuine user acceptance testing that is done. And what I mean by that is taking our new piece of technology, putting it into a business environment or a frontline environment, and essentially asking them to use it like they would in real life, post go live. And that is where you will see defects. And most of the time, they're not actually technical defects. The solution might be technically sound, but perhaps the UI is a bit off, or it doesn't make sense, the language that we've used in there, or actually our assumption of this business process is absolutely incorrect. We didn't capture this correctly. So adequate UAT is vital. We know that. But the flip side of this, when we look at this from an experiential change lens, is inviting end users into UAT is actually saying to them, we trust you, we trust your opinion, you have a voice, help us shape this, be part of this journey. And it's actually really, really empowering for people. I have a great example of this. So again, I was working on a very large HR ecosystem project where we were looking to deploy a very large number of SKUs in a very short amount of time. And we got to the stage where, the project team got to the stage, I should say, where they had decided to remove UAT. They were going to do UAT themselves internally with their system admins. And how many people listening to this are potentially guilty of that? I know I've seen that in projects before. But as the change manager on the project, I stepped in and said, look, let's give these guys a chance. Let's give them a voice. It's a really short amount of time, but let's see who's willing to join us on a UAT here. And we had a target of 5 people in the business to help us with that. Within, I want to say 3 hours, we had 75 people from all across Australia who wanted to opt in. And we let all of them play with the system. We let all of them give us feedback. And then all of them unofficially went off and became change champions in their local areas. They were really excited to get that first look at the new system. They were really excited to get to maybe shape it and see where their feedback landed when it went to go live. And exclusively, all of them gave really, really good feedback. Post-implementation, it was really smooth in their areas when we did go live. So UAT can be a very, very powerful tool for you, and it's a really strong enable mechanism when it comes to change management. So key takeaway here is when we're enabling, we are constructing a solid foundation. So we need to determine whether the solution we're building is fit for purpose. And the way we determine that is that we bring end users into the design phase and the testing phase. So that ensures our workforce and us as a project team are set up for success. Okay, let us keep going. Oh, I've gone backwards. Let's go forwards. Embed, we're getting towards the end, I promise. All right, so we've hit our North Star. There we are. The star is in the middle. It's looking gorgeous. But once we are live, and it's not very long after we are live that the project team usually does exit and we transition. But this is the danger zone when it comes to a new system implementation, because the danger is that people will slide back into old habits. And this is where the embed phase is really, really important. And it's here that we actually shift our focus away from future state, because we've hit the future state, and we start shifting towards organizational culture and changing the culture and embedding our new piece of technology or our new business processes as business as usual in our the thread that makes up our organizational culture. So we need to make the new way the only way, and it's how we will achieve those project benefits. So how do we do that? All right. Well, you will see that at the very top of this list, we have leadership. So to make change stick, we need leaders modeling desired behaviors. I'm sure as well, if you're dialing in, you've probably seen this before. If the boss doesn't use the new system, or our leader isn't championing the change, no one else is going to do it. So that's the very, very first vital thing you should do. We should have our sponsors and our leaders in the organization opting in and modeling those, new system behaviors and doing things, as per what was described and approved. The other thing that we can do, though, to get the rest of the business really embracing the new piece of technology is use some fun things, such as incentives, rewards and recognition, gamification, which is a really easy tool to really celebrate and focus on the right behaviors. So the other thing that we can do is also set up feedback mechanisms to catch those frustrations and to let people know, we're not going to deploy and run. We're here for you. We're still here for you. Let us know how we can improve it. Your voice still matters. And that's really helpful for people as well. Great example of something that we're doing. Gamification is something we do quite often because it's low-hanging fruit, as I like to say. But this is an example of something we haven't yet rolled out, but we are about to. So we're working with another client who's rolling out a very large rostering system, and it is the first time they've had an enterprise-wide rostering system in their organization. And we are really looking to drive behavior of people clocking in and out of their shifts as close to their rostered time as possible. And as such, we're actually doing a competition. We're going to have region versus region, team versus team, a little bit of a state of origin feel to that. And we're going to be rewarding teams and individuals who are, most accurate to the minute of their rostered time where they're clocking in and out. And by bringing fun and to highlighting those champions in the organization, we're pretty confident that we are going to shift that behavior, and it's going to become the norm that everyone is thinking, I've got to clock in and out before and at the end of my shift. So that's a really fun, easy thing that anybody can do with their project as well. So key takeaway here for Embed is that we really need to anchor this transformation or this technical change into the very fabric of the culture of our organization. So if we really need to ensure that change is sustained through leadership, modeling those new ways of working so that it becomes muscle memory for people. This is the new way and we know how to use it. And again, that does happen after the project is finished. All right, I'm almost there, John. I know you're busting to ask me some questions. So we'll go to our last one, which is evolve. And this is a nod to saying that the new state, it's actually not static. The day you go live is actually just the very beginning of this new normal or this new organizational culture that you've put in place. And if we stand still and we do nothing, then we will indeed stagnate. So how do we overcome this? All right, so these are our evolve activities. Okay. The first thing I would say is, yes, you absolutely need to do a transition to BAU. We all know that's, best practice when it comes to project delivery. But we often only do that to our technical teams. I know I'm guilty of that as a project manager in the past. We hand it over to an enterprise apps team or a system admin or someone technical who's going to keep the lights on. But do we adequately transition business processes or that leadership modeling that we discussed, or the benefits realization is often something we do throughout the project, but then we kind of just leave it and trust that someone's picking it up. But when we're coming at an implementation from an evolve lens, we are thinking about how do we improve this system over time? How do we how do we standardize how we're doing things? How do we get those benefits? And someone has to own that, or actually multiple people. Hopefully the leaders in your organization are owning that. And the other thing that should absolutely be done is that continuous improvement cycle. We do talk about it, but in a lot of BAU, change advisory boards and meetings like that I've sat on, it's often with the lens of technical change. We have a software upgrade happening. We have a system release happening. But what about enhancements to improve the employee experience or our customer experience? That kind of stuff also drives the evolution of our system. So key takeaway here is that there must be continuous evolution, beyond the project, beyond that go live. And the system has to be able to adapt to some of that feedback. If we are seeing trends or we are seeing some big opportunity areas, someone needs to own that and make that happen. And that's, again, going to be a better outcome for your system, for the business, and ultimately for your end users or your customers, whoever is most impacted by this new ERP going in. All right. My last slide, and then I think you're going to ask me a couple of questions, John. So this is about, summarizing where we are. So we really encourage you, and hopefully you've had a couple of little thought starters here today, to integrate change and integrate that human aspect of an ERP implementation into your project from day one. In fact, I would say it's well before day one, because when you engage people, you really are creating the absolute best solution that is going to pass testing, that is going to have a smooth go live, that is going to continuously evolve. And people are the key, because a successful ERP transformation, it isn't actually magic. It is when we know where we are today, where are we going, and how are we going to engage people to help them, to help us co-design a really effective ERP system that everybody loves. And if you're lucky, it'll be the hero project of the year at your organization. That is all from me, John. I'm going to stop sharing and throw to you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for those insights. Very, very rich in flavour. I think one major part for me is it's refreshing to hear the strong passion for the person in these technology change projects. Each of those elements of the P4E really clearly focus and are centered on people, and I think that's evident through a lot of your experience there. The content aligns with ERP, which is one of the reasons. Sorry, Humans of ERP, which is one of the reasons we drove this campaign and initiative in the first place. I do have a line of questions, and I guess my first question is linked to what do you do when an organization is simply not ready to implement a change? And what I mean by that is the business side of the equation is not ready, but the project has its funding and has its approval. So what are some of the signs that a business is not ready, and what are some of the signs that if you kick off that project, even though everything is lined up to start it, you are going to fail?
Yeah, that's a great question. My strong recommendation is, if overwhelmingly the business is telling you they do not want that project right now, you have to take that feedback very, very seriously. But I do caveat that with Sometimes you have to find that out in a roundabout way. And asking people directly or asking just a small number of people might not give you the data that you're looking for, because it's always the squeaky wheels that are the loudest. So I really encourage that discovery. And I didn't mention this too strongly before, but discovery means going to those teams. And if that means you're in the top end of Queensland, go to the top end of Queensland, sit with them, watch them. Don't just ask them. And you will actually get a richer insight, because they might be saying no, but what you've observed might say, they're okay. They've already got this workaround. They just don't know, because they're coming at that question in a completely different way. So I would say take the time to really do that discovery. And if you genuinely think that this is a bad thing for the wider business, and that it is a waste of money, because 70% of projects do fail, or it's a bad thing for customers and it will negatively impact the bottom line, then it is your job as the project manager to say, we should not proceed with this right now.
It's interesting because in my experience, I mean, you mentioned that you visited 70 sites on one of those site visit discovery activities, and you learned so much from that. In my experience, not all organizations like to invest that amount of energy and effort and dollars up front. It's nice to hear that this organization reference was. How do you get that story across the line early in the piece? How do you convince that there will be an X-fold improvement or return on investment of that upfront activity?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, well, it's quite easy. You just ask them how many of your projects have actually realized benefits or have actually, implemented at the go live exactly the way you thought they would. And then, most people say, no, they haven't, or we wasted money, or we did lots of contract variations. And the counter to that is yes, because you didn't get deep business requirements from the start. So a small investment today, pays dividends in the end. And it's also, I like to describe it to my clients as I don't want to say a step backwards, but it's a slight delay to start, to then be really quick at the end, because you will have, the technical solution design happens quicker, the approval happens quicker, the testing happens quicker, and that's where we see a lot of shortcomings. And then, you either start later or you go to the board and ask for more money and more time. Which one would you prefer?
Yeah, no, that's good. And the other part of the P4E in the evolve phase, I think this is a very interesting phase, because all the organization's energy and effort gets to what they see as the finish line, but actually it really is the start line for the life of that new system, as that system's being embedded and evolving into the organization. So often all the energy and effort is just drained by the time you hit a finish line. That's the project finish line, but it's the start line of the rest of the organization. So just a passing comment on that one.
Yeah, just on that, John, it pays dividends if you actually take that phase really seriously, because not often do we do just one project in an organization. So if you care at that back end or that post implementation, your end users or your business are going to trust you more, so that the next time you say, okay, we're rolling out another project, they go, you took good care of me, you listened to me, I'm going to give you great insights for this next one. So it pays dividends, that externality just keeps going if you do that right.
Fantastic. And we could talk these questions for hours. I think we are coming up to time. I do have one final question, and it's really around everyone wants everything yesterday. So the pace of change, the speed of change, the speed of capability, especially in the consumer world, which then moves across into the enterprise world, there's an expectation that it's there and it's there and then. Which engagement activities do you think deliver the quickest traction in larger organizations?
In terms of that you can do quickly?
That you can implement quickly, but also not just implement, you gain traction as a part of that engagement activity. So whether it's at the start of the project, whether it's a user acceptance test preparation, or whether it's at the evolve stage, but do you have an example of one of those engagement activities that really gets strong buy-in, and from that strong buy-in, you can deliver traction and get the results?
Yeah, and it's a really again easy one. We all do this, and you can spin it up really quickly. But it's the classic all-in announcements. everybody loves to dial in. They say they're busy, but they'll dial in. And the other thing I've seen really well is drop-in sessions for demos. So if you are at that stage, showing people what they're in for, and if it's not ready, like if it's not completely finished, that's okay. You say that. You say, this is what it looks like. I know you're really curious. I cannot express to you how many people, when I've done that, like hundreds of people dial into that. And when you don't do that, they make up their own story, as I mentioned. So if you can nip that in the bud and say, hey, we're opening the door, come on in. Yeah, it's really easy to get engagement. And then when people are chatting at the water cooler, they're saying the narrative that you have shaped, which is really cool as well. So yeah, show them, open the door, let them in, let them test, let them have a voice. Easy.
Yeah. I like it how you referred to it as easy. I rescued a couple of projects in the past few years, and someone asked, what was it like? And I said it was actually easy. And I think what people lose sight on is sometimes it's just relentless discipline. It's going back to the basics and doing the things we all know we should be doing, but we often don't do them for whatever reason, whether bureaucracy gets in the way or whether there's another factor in the way. So sometimes the basics and those examples that you gave around open door policies or a town hall or any bit of true visible leadership in these projects makes a huge difference. And I know that when you've got very strong, visible leaders who empower organizations, the organizations feel a lot more like they're a part of the solution versus being the problem. So thank you very much again for joining us today. Thank you for your insights. This webinar is a part of our ERP, Humans of ERP webinar series. So we will continue with more of these over the future. If anyone on the call or anyone dialing in is interested, you can join some expressions of interest either via directly out to me, LinkedIn, whether it's the Humans of ERP webpage, whether it's connecting with any other people on the call. I would encourage you all to go and have a read of some of the features that have been published. And there's a pretty impressive one coming out, I believe, in the next week.
That would be yours, John, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, of course. Very modest, very modest.
I love it.
We are right on time. So once again, I thank the participants, and we'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Thank you.